So I want to go back in time a little bit and talk about when I first got my diagnosis, um, which was really unclear actually because when I first got diagnosed, I still didn't know that it was cancer. What had happened was I had these cysts on my ovaries that were becoming really problematic and I needed to get them removed. I was supposed to get an outpatient laparoscopic procedure like the week we went into lockdown. So that ended up not happening. One of them like ruptured later on, which was insanely painful. And I, between having COVID and then having this cyst rupture, I was in bad shape and I was like, all right, I gotta go home. I gotta like quarantine and go home because I can't even take care of myself anymore. Plus, the world is like crazy and I'm sick. So I go back to my parents' house. I get my insurance switched over. I'm like planning to go to my OBGYN and resume the process of, getting these cysts removed. And then, you know, it felt like one of them ruptured again. And so I went to the hospital and they did all the scans and the tests. And the doctor came in and he was like, "You have a mass the size of a grapefruit on your left ovary. And it might be benign, but it might be malignant." And I was like, "What?" Like, as soon as you hear the word malignant, you just instantly think death. Like, I was so freaked out. My mom was freaked out. My dad, oh wow, my hair is like so crazy right now. I really shouldn't get distracted by the sight of myself recording, or I'll just like never ever get anything done. Like, I'm really bothered by like my neck right now. I've been afraid to comb my hair because like I'm afraid it'll start falling out. But okay, I'm actually gonna pause right there because I'm like really bothered by that line around my neck. Hang on. Okay, that was ridiculous. I get why vanity is a sin. Like, that was so unnecessary. Anyway, the doctor comes in and he's like, "We're not even equipped to deal with this here. I would recommend that you go to Ruby, which is the hospital where I trained at, and they have a cancer center. It's 2 hours away. If you want to go somewhere closer, you can go to Wheeling," or he named some other hospital nearby in West Virginia. And I was like, "No, I want to go to the one you said to go to." And so they strapped me into an ambulance and transferred me to another hospital like 2 hours away. It was the most uncomfortable, difficult, painful ride of my life because if you're not familiar with the infrastructure in West Virginia, the roads are not the best. So imagine going over like a million potholes when you're already in agonizing pain, and that's what that was like. So, I try really hard to keep this like really pithy and kind of funny so that way they're not like a total drag to watch because then who would watch them? Like, no one wants to sit around on YouTube and be depressed all day. Actually, there's probably some contingent of weirdos that do go on YouTube and just like watch really depressing shit and are like really happy about it, but I don't feel like that's my audience. Like, to me, it's just people who are going through a hard time who need somebody that's been through it who can like talk about it in a way that does not make your brain feel like I cannot process this. I am shutting down emotionally and having a nervous breakdown and I no longer see the meaning of life. Because it's really easy to do that when you get a diagnosis like this, but you gotta not do that. You gotta find a way out of it because if you do, then it's like you've given up and then it's like already too late for you at that point. I that's kind of fucked up to say. I shouldn't say that, but like I felt myself shutting down like more than once, and like this was one of those times when he was like malignant, like cancer center, like grapefruit sized mass. I was like, what the? Oh my god, dude! Like, it's the end of days for me. Well, I didn't think that yet, but like I was pretty freaked out. So the ambulance gets to the other hospital, and basically they brought me in, they gave me drugs, which thank God. And so I just want to highlight here how painful this stuff was, because women are basically conditioned to internalize all of our pain. you know, because when you stereotype people and depict them as being like weak or excitable or emotional and constantly tell them to calm down, all that happens is that when someone is truly suffering, they feel like they can't express it because they've already been stereotyped into, you know, implying that any expression at all is just hysteria. So for the problems that I was having, like I got to the hospital, the first hospital, they gave me Dilaudid, which if you're not familiar with it is like a very potent like painkiller. I think they gave me like one or two hits of that. They gave me something called Toradol, which is a painkiller. It's not. It's like a non-narcotic painkiller and an anti-inflammatory. And then when I got to the second hospital, they were alternating giving me um, morphine and fentanyl like every 2 hours because that's how crazy my vitals were, like just from pain, you know. And by the time I was getting ready to like check out or whatever, um, my doctor was like, okay, well, either we can admit you for pain and we'll give you like a pain pump and just put you up in the hospital till we can get your vitals under control, or I can like give you something right before you go, before your parents get here to pick you up because they're a couple of hours away. And then we can give you a prescription for like Oxy and you can get it filled right away. So you can manage your own pain at home because you're going to be more comfortable at home. So, like, if you're giving someone morphine and fentanyl after they've already had Dilaudid and you still can't get their pain under control, like, don't even talk to me about hysteria, okay? Like, it was excruciating, and that wasn't even the worst part about it. So the worst part is this doctor came in, and like all the doctors were women, which was pretty cool, I thought. And oh, this is gonna fall. I have like the worst jury rig ever. I just have my phone like between my knees. Like it looks like I'm giving birth like to my phone. And that's my tripod for the moment. So this doctor came in and like she meant well, but like read the room. Like I just want to go back and like force her to take like sensitivity training because she walks in and the first thing she says is, "Were you planning on having children?" Like that was her cold open. And later on, I was like, "Dude, you should not be in charge of telling anyone anything." Because then she was like, "Well, I just feel like you should know that if this is ovarian cancer, they're probably going to have to perform a hysterectomy and, you know, remove both of your ovaries." And I was like, I went from thinking I was getting a laparoscopic outpatient surgery to finding out that I would potentially never have children or a reproductive system. So, you know, it was a lot to take in. And then I had this other nurse who was like really nice and well meaning, but she kept talking about her friend who had cancer. So basically, talking to me as if like I already had cancer and I didn't know yet if that was the case, which obviously it ended up being the case. But like I still had hope at that time because they didn't know if it was benign or malignant. They kept telling me like it's probably malignant. All of my tests were like off the charts, like you have cancer. They do this thing called a CA-125 when they test for ovarian cancer, and my levels were like 3 times the normal amount. They did like a tumor marker that was insanely high. So like they knew like before I did because I was like, well, there's still a chance it's benign, right? I was like in total denial. And that's also what the nurse told me. She's like, well, you'll probably experience the 5 stages of grief, you know? You'll go through denial, you'll feel anger, you'll feel grief. I don't know what the 5 stages are, but I'm sure I've been through all of them multiple times by this point. So they schedule an appointment for me with the oncologist at the hospital, and then they send me home with pain meds, and you know, then I had to wait, and I went in to see him. Same thing, they were pretty sure that it was malignant. I was still like clinging to the hope that it wasn't, and they explained that if it wasn't, they would take out the mass and my left ovary, and then they would leave everything else because if you are younger when this happens to you, like 20s, 30s, into your 40s, like they do try to preserve your fertility. Usually it happens to older women, like postmenopausal women, so it's not an issue. Like they just take everything out, like just to be safe. But if there's a chance they can save it, then they will. So that was what he told me. He's like, "Do you want us to try and save it if we can?" And I was like, "Yeah, I want to keep whatever body parts I can, you know. But if they're cancerous, take them out. Like, I don't want to have cancer." And so I'm going to digress here because this is a really important digression. And I'll come back to the story in like a part two if I need to, but this is so important. So here's the thing, I'm one of those people that never really felt like I wanted kids. Like, I just fantasized about other things. I fantasized about writing books and making movies and traveling and getting into adventures. And that's all I've done, like, with my life. And I love it. And I'm happy. And at no point did I ever feel like, I think I really just want to settle down and, like, have a family because I'm a woman and I can. So why wouldn't I? Which I feel like is the assumption. And if you don't want that, and you're a woman, it's almost as if you're made to feel like there's something wrong with you. Like, even knowing what I wanted and what I didn't want, and like, I feel like half of life is knowing what you don't want. Like, I always like felt like I had to wonder in the back of my brain, but like, oh, what if I met the right person? And like, what if I did have a baby? I would probably love it so much. Like, not probably, like, of course I would love it, like my child, you know? But like I kind of pictured like being in my 40s and maybe adopting, but like I knew that like I am kind of a juvenile person. Like I sound intelligent, but I'm quite immature in many ways, and I've always been that way. And I just, knew I couldn't handle anything like raising a child, probably not until I was in my 40s. And it just made more sense to think about adopting some kid that needs a home than it did like going through the agony of like pushing a new human out of my loins. Like nothing about that appealed to me. Like who does that appeal to? I mean, okay, it's miraculous. I'm sure some women are just like, oh yeah, maternity. But I think a lot of women also go through childbirth and enter motherhood and it's very painful. And they're not allowed to acknowledge how painful it is and how like dark it probably is in a lot of ways. It's just supposed to be some happy fucking Pampers commercial bullshit. And you know what? That's not life. So I always thought I didn't want kids, but when that lady was like, so did you want children? Because it's probably not going to happen. At that point, I knew I didn't because I had no emotional reaction whatsoever. I was like, oh, really? Huh. Like, I cried more when I found out later I was going to have to get chemo. My hair was going to fall out than I did when I found out I might have to get a hysterectomy. And, when I found out I had gotten a hysterectomy, when I found out I had gotten a hysterectomy, because I didn't know till after the surgery whether I was getting one or not, all I did was turn to my doctor and say, this is probably like the wrong thing to ask, but does this mean I'll never have my period again? And she was like, yes. I was like, yes, yes. Because that shit was fucking painful. Like, once they had taken everything out and saw exactly how fucked up I truly was, like, I had endometriosis in my uterus, my fallopian tubes, like, both of the cysts slash masses slash tumors on both of my ovaries were malignant because I had one on my right side too. It wasn't the size of a grapefruit, it was more plum size, but like it was bad. Like all of the pain that I've gone through since surgery is like nothing compared to how fucked up my body was beforehand. So I'm glad it's all gone. I don't feel any different. I was scared when they were talking about taking all those body parts out. I was like, how can people just go back to normal after you've removed that many internal organs? Like, will I still be a woman? And I was like, of course I'll still be a woman. Like, it's not defined by what body parts I have, which is a really important lesson as a human, as an ally for everyone. It is not defined by what body parts you do or don't have. I'm still a woman and I don't have a uterus, fallopian tubes, or ovaries. So, what does that tell you? Anyway, um, I just lost fucking chemo brain. I totally just lost my train of thought. I'm gonna have to pause while I get it back. Okay, I just went back and watched that last clip so I can remember what I was talking about when I got distracted by my little ally rant soapbox thing, which I still feel is like really important to say, and it's 100% the truth. But I had asked my nurse, like, how do you take all that stuff out and people just don't even notice? Because I knew I was going to have to go through post surgical menopause, because menopause is supposed to be gradual over a period of time. But if they take all that stuff out while you're still young, you just go through, like, you instantly enter menopause in like a month. And I was so scared, like, I was going to wake up and like have like a grandma body and like my sex drive would just be gone, which did not happen. So if you have to go through something like this and you're still young, like don't be afraid you're not going to lose your sexuality as a person or a woman or your femininity or whatever. So, and the way that my nurse explained it to me was this. She was like, everything that we're going to take out is causing you pain. You will not miss it. Also, the parts that we're talking about are extremely small. Like your ovaries are like, she like demonstrated. She's like, they're like this. They're like, they're supposed to be they're supposed to be the size of the head of a pin. Yours, however, are like this. And even the uterus, she said, is like very small. She like did this little thing with her hand, and I was like, oh. And because I just assumed it was big enough to hold a baby, right? So I assumed it was like they were taking out a kidney or something. And she's like, no, it stretches. So I was like, oh, okay. And I haven't missed any of it. I'm not aware that it's gone. I'm aware that all of the horrible, horrible pain it was causing me is gone. But I don't miss any of my lady parts that I wonder what they do with them. I like don't want to know. Ew. I like really wish I hadn't thought of that. But anyway, I mean obviously I'm sure they dispose of them. I don't know. It's just so fucked up to think about. So yeah. But I'm getting ahead of myself. At the time I just found out at the hospital that I definitely had to get surgery. Okay. And then I went to the doctor and he was like, you definitely are going to need surgery. And we won't know until we take the mass out if it's malignant or benign. And at that point, we'll biopsy it while you're still under. If it's benign, we'll close you up. You're good to go. If it's malignant, we'll perform a hysterectomy, take out your other ovary, and, fallopian tubes, any area that could be potentially affected by ovarian cancer, you know, which is one of the hardest parts was going into it not knowing whether or not I had cancer, whether or not I was going to have to get a hysterectomy, whether or not I would wake up on the table with everything intact, or I'd wake up on the table and find out that I could never have kids. Which, as I previously mentioned, wasn't as traumatic for me as it would be for, a lot of other women. But it was still a lot to have hanging in the balance, and just not know before I got put under. So that was hugely stressful because they scheduled my surgery for like 2 months out. And like, keep in mind, like, this tumor was like huge. And my mom was like, well, what if it gets worse? And he was like, oh, the doctor wasn't even there at this point. Like, the nurse had to reassure us. Like, she was like, oh, he would have scheduled it for sooner if he thought that it was necessary. And it totally got worse. So, I don't know, you know. But basically, I went home. I got put on painkillers. I spent the next month on Percocet. No, I'm sorry, it wasn't the next month. I spent the next, like, couple of weeks alternating, like, Percocet and Vicodin, which came back to bite me in the ass later. And I forget how long it was before I ended up getting super sick again, going back into the hospital. And then they had originally moved my surgery up by a week because my mom called and was just like, no, like, you need to help my daughter now, please. Like, she's not in good shape. And they moved it up by a week. And then when I went back to the hospital, they moved it up by like a month. They suddenly got an opening like that week. And I was like, yes, I will take it.